Appropriations Committee. We are now doing Department of Transportation. I have to my immediate left Councilman Leon Pinkett, Vice Chair of the committee for the 7th District. To his left, Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District. To his left, Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd. In the back, Councilman Brandon Scott, 2nd District, member of the committee. Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee. Right, Councilman Isaac Gitzi Schleifer from the 5th District, member of the committee. To his right, Vice President of the Council, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton from the 6th District, member of the committee. And to her right, Councilman Bill Henry from the 4th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. Numerous other staffers floating around from Council President Jack Young's office. Representing Mayor Catherine Pugh are Karen Stokes, Poetry Deal, and Karan Banks for the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. We have, okay, so we are going to go from 4:30. We will have a hard stop at 5:30. During that 1 hour period, we'll discuss street and traffic management. Colleagues, if I ask you to, I may cut you off and tell you it's to save it for the latter portion. We will be reconvening at 6 p.m. and going till 8 p.m. straight with a hard stop then to discuss all other services. Director, if you would please do your presentation, and I ask that you keep it to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 minutes. Most of my colleagues, as with every agency, know the questions that they are seeking answers to. So with that, take it away, Director. If you would kindly introduce everyone on your team that you have with you, and then take it away, please.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
we've
Chair.
also, I'm sorry, we've also been joined by Councilman Robert Stokes from the 12th District, and, yep, go ahead. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle Pouchot, Director, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. I will present just 2 items to start with, and the rest of them when we reconvene for the rest of the DOT budget. But I'd like to introduce my senior team now, if I may. Our team consists of line and operations managers. So I'd like to start with the operations managers. They're the ones who manage most of the people in the department, starting with Muhammad Khalid, who is our chief engineer, overall engineering, traffic, right-of-way functions. Second, I'd like to introduce Kenny Ching, overall maintenance functions. Third, I'd like to introduce Tisha Griffith, who's Letitia, who's over all of our administrative functions, HR, finance, procurement, et cetera. And then fourth, we have a vacancy in policy, and currently Ebony Wimbush is serving over policy, and she's also the chief of staff. And so our 3 administrative functions on the senior team is chief of staff. Second is Amma Bindi, who's over performance and program management. And third is Frank Murphy, who is a senior advisor to the director. And also joining us up front is DK, who is our Dorinda Singh, who is our finance director. And so I'll quickly go through street and traffic maintenance, and we can go into questions. So for street management, there is a budget of $32 million. There are 411 positions contained in this area. This operation is responsible for maintaining and upkeeping all of the right-of-way and public spaces for Baltimore City, and they also resurface local streets. The operating budget consists of 411 positions, some contract work, a lot of materials, $5 million worth. And there is, I want to talk a little bit about capital in with this, because much of what we do in DOT is capital, and so there is also about $33 million in our capital budget that goes more toward construction, reconstruction, and installation of sidewalks, bike lanes, road and bridge construction, and that's it. And I'll quickly talk about traffic management. In our traffic area, we have over $12 million recommended in the 2019 operating budget. There are 111 positions in our traffic management area. And this area manages the movement of pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists citywide. And they also maintain all operational elements in the public space, 1,300 traffic signals, traffic signs, pavement markings, and again, the capital side of this is involved in upgrade and reconstruction, rehabilitation, and providing new services, all for our traffic management center, for signals, and for intelligent transportation systems. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. We're going to start with first Councilwoman Sneed. Councilwoman Sneed. You. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you? We're only doing traffic management and street management. Okay.
I'm sorry, or before we begin, just because there's kind of this is a bit of a weird break in what we're covering now versus what we're covering after our break. Why don't we leave or do our best to leave some of the more agency-wide stuff until the latter half, just where we've got all services. But keeping in mind, we do have another 54 minutes for this portion.
Okay. So I guess I want to ask about, in terms of street management and traffic management, where is this budget adequately covering? So last year I spent a lot of time here throughout 4 days of budget hearings asking about whether we have an adequate number of engineers in various city agencies to make sure that we're people with professional skills planning to internally to be able to execute projects quickly. And so one of the, I guess, what I see as critical to street and traffic management is whether when we are resurfacing, we are able to, in a timely fashion, have plans for changes that need to be made on the basis of the downtown bicycle network or the low stress bicycle network, or whether we should be implementing, creating additional dedicated bus lanes and things like that to encourage mode shift out of cars as a key way of being able to manage traffic in the city. We have a significant, we have far less bicycle ridership and opt-in bus ridership than other cities, just because the infrastructure isn't there to make them successful modes of transportation that are safe for folks. Is that part of our street management and traffic management budgeting specifically?
So there, we could use more in the professional services in the department to be reactive to our ongoing program. So that would be one way to take what we're doing today and plan for it immediately. The thing that I think we should do more of, though, is advanced planning. And so in the budget, contained in the budget, in the capital budget, are three programs that I think get us to that place where we're looking in advance on how we want to restructure our system to be more proactive with sustainable solutions. And so those three items are, number one, a transportation plan. We were able to pull some planning money to begin the baseline of that plan, which has started. But in FY19, we'll embark on a full transportation plan. And that will give us a framework for where we want to go so that we're not trying to rush and determine how to resurface a road right before we do it. The second thing is about performance, program, and project management, and that's looking at the life cycle of a project and really understanding where we are today, managing that life cycle, and then carrying out the program in a strategic way with the resources we have. And so, you know, there's never going to be enough money right now to do everything, but if we're more strategic and we're better managing the monies that we're using, then I think we all have a better idea of what we're trying to accomplish and then how we're going to get there.
So
and
are
then the
you-
third piece is asset management. And that's about knowing about the condition of what we have, and so we can balance off need, economic development priorities, as well as retooling our system.
So I guess my question is, do you have engineers enough to do this, or what are the barriers that you're facing right now to having the engineers in-house in order to execute plans? When I say plans, I mean this road needs to be resurfaced next year. We're able to plan ahead a year in advance and say this road needs to be resurfaced, and it has a plan for how bicycle infrastructure or something needs to fit in there. We're tasking somebody well enough in advance to do that. Do we have the people, or are we facing barriers to getting those people?
So some of the barriers we're facing is in getting talent here. We've had a vacancy in the senior traffic engineering area for a while, and we're recruiting, looking for that expertise. We want folks that have professional licenses, but we're growing the department, and we're really attracting quality engineers, planners, folks with certifications, people with lots of experience. I mean, we really need people who know this city and have a history of what's happened in the city. So we have some challenges in those areas, but I believe that we pulled together a team and the resources within the department, and that this year we have a very publicly presented implementation and construction program. We've put together an internal Complete Streets review committee, and we're looking at every project that we're implementing prior to putting it on the street. And if it's not right, we're pulling it back and fixing it immediately, either with in-house staff, and we do have consultant and contract support that is pretty typical of most transportation departments. So could we have more? Yes, but I think we're doing really well with what we have.
And one last question for now. Has the department does the department have a formal process that can be made public about what its project selection, prioritization, and project delivery from concept to completion processes are? It's obvious that the department is engaging in selecting projects, and it's obvious that the department is engaging in conceiving of and delivering projects. And everybody that I talk to doesn't understand how any of that happens, that there's not a clear and transparent public understanding, or even for us, what the understanding is as to how projects are selected, chosen, and what it takes to get them from concept to completion.
That process has been very bifurcated, and so it's taken me some time to understand it. But what we're doing is we're putting in place documentation where folks can clearly understand that.
How soon will that documentation be available to us as council members?
So my hope, or what I'll need to have is something in place as I'm developing the FY2020 budget. And so that process begins late this summer. And so we'll have at least, kind of piecemeal documents that we've culled together, because that is the truth about how our process works. I must say that this year, I've said this a number of times, Tom Stoser and the Department of Planning really helped me to kind of learn as fast as I could how the different approval processes work. And capital investment was so important for me because everything that you see in operating feeds to the capital program. And so with the help of my partners in the budget office and the planning department, you on the council, I was able to catch up, kind of piecemeal these documents together that all exist in various places, understand where the department had been in terms of prioritizing and selecting projects, kind of move that needle a little to get more to where we want to be.
So,
before-
I mean, so you're telling me that it's going to be before, like, we're going to be looking at the 2020 budget before you can put in front of us something like you don't have anybody on staff or collectively among the staff, people who can just come up with like, here's what it takes for project X, Y, Z kind of projects. Like nobody, because you're engaging in the process, but like nobody can just go like, well, this is the steps that I have to go through. Nobody? Like it's going to take until we're looking at the 2020 budget to have that?
Yeah, we actually
That's-
have a process chart that shows that right now.
Can I have that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
What's, Marguerite, what number are we at? Councilman, can you just describe the process? What is that, the process?
What the Department of Transportation engages in to prioritize, for the prioritization and selection of projects and how it gets from concept to completion in its project delivery process, what that step-by-step process looks like for various types of transportation projects.
Let me attempt to summarize. You want a workflow process for prioritization of capital projects.
Prioritization and delivery of
Prioritization.
projects, and not just ones that are big projects in the capital budget, but routine kind of projects that the department engages in, like resurfacing and ADA upgrades and other
Got it.
streetlight replacement.
Got it. Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. I just had two very short questions. One, I noticed, maybe I'm reading it wrong, service or line item 683 indicates a 131,000 decrease in equipment costs or equipment. And then I think I missed the other piece. 684 also indicates funding decrease for maintenance supplies as well. How does that impact our ability to do things like crosswalks painting, line painting, that kind of thing? And the reason I'm asking is I was recently told that there would be delay in a project in my district related to crosswalk repaving because of there's been equipment in the shop for a significant amount of time. Is there a correlation between these request reductions and the availability of equipment?
No, these are areas where we hadn't made expenditures in the past.
Okay.
So it's a continuation of a slight reduction. I think perhaps the issue you spoke of, we have some specialized equipment that when it goes down, it takes a little while to get it fixed. So hopefully that'll be done quickly and we'll be back on schedule.
Okay. And my last question, on service 684, are these all brand new service measures? Because none of them have anything. I mean, there's performance measures, but there's no goals or anything filled out.
For which one?
Service 684 on page 518.
Traffic. So these measures, I can't see them on this sheet.
Outside of traffic signal communication, it says they were new in FY19, but there's no actuals for any of those at the end of that year.
So the
Or in
first
18.
measure is new, and the percent of lane road closures within 15 days, so we wouldn't have any actual. The traffic signals repaired is not new, so we need to get you the actuals for FY18, is that correct? So this is a revised measure. What we did working with, we looked at our performance measures, and some of them counted things that we were doing, but didn't provide the measure within the whole. So you see how these have percent completed? And so we wanted to get at not only are we closing out service requests, but how are we doing in regard to having the whole system working properly? And so we did not have a previous way of measuring in this way.
And do you know what it was revised from?
What the original measure was it counting? Oh, this is the 24-hour measure. So previously in the budget, we had a performance measure to fix traffic signals within 24 hours. It shows in your budget book a reduction to 6 hours. I believe that should be 12 hours. We're looking at cutting the time in half. Our performance was really good with 24 hours. We can get you the 24-hour number, but we are working to get that measure to show 12 hours and not 6 hours.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there would just need to be a correction there because it's also written in the subtext, more ambitious 6-hour benchmark. Okay. So that should read 24.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sneed. You're on the list.
Thank you. So, can you tell me how much money we spend in the ATVS program?
And what?
In the ATVES program?
Okay, so that's actually in traffic safety, but we'll. So the total budget for ATVES, the contract is $5 million, and staff is the budget for. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone, Mr. President, members. I'm Robert Liberati, the director of the ATVES program. We have about a $5.5 million increase in next fiscal year's budget to cover the new cameras in the ATVES program. That's on top of about $1 million from last year, so about 6.5.
So out of that 6.5 million, what's used for the communications portion of it to let the residents and citizens know about this campaign?
Ma'am, as you know, besides the strict enforcement issuing violations, we believe in communication with the public. And that includes ads, press conferences, et cetera. We also go to schools and things like that. But there is $250,000, which is $125,000 per red light and per speed cameras in the contract. That's part of the vendor's responsibility to provide that funding for that, and whatever's left, they have to return it to the city.
So altogether, then, what's that altogether? I'm sorry.
$250,000 per year.
Is there, I haven't heard any commercials or anything like that on the radio, so I'm curious to if we can get a breakdown for everything that we spent thus far and what is the remainder, what's the leftover to make sure that this money is actually being allocated to this. So can we make that a question? I don't know where we are for the council, but can we make that a question that we get an answer to?
Can you
So I'm looking for how much money in total we spend for this public information section under ATVS program.
are you talking about for fiscal 18 or for the upcoming year?
Nope, for fiscal 18.
For the previous year.
Yeah, for now.
So I just want to be clear that, or Councilwoman, the numbers that they're discussing, you're discussing the numbers in the FY19 budget book, correct, Rob?
So I want both because I want to
What
be able to
Robert
compute.
was talking about what's in our current contract.
Yeah.
That's what's in our current contract.
So I want both.
So what's the time frame of that contract, Rob?
It runs May to May, and you're correct. I was talking about the next fiscal.
Can you come back up for a second, Rob? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on what the councilwoman's asking for here. Okay, the contract's when?
Okay, I was incorrect. It is next fiscal year 19.
Those numbers that you were discussing.
Correct,
So they're for the next fiscal year?
correct.
Okay, so can I then, so we didn't have anything allocated for this year?
We did. Now we're talking about press information and public
Everything, yes.
information.
So
Yeah.
is it the same from last year as this year?
Correct.
Okay, so I want to see this year, and I want to see next year's, and then I want to see a breakdown of everything that we've used the money for.
Okay, we have run ads, billboards, et cetera.
Okay,
So an itemized, if we can have an itemized spreadsheet on what those items are that we spent it on, and then, like, it should all add up. So if you're saying we're spending $1 million, I want to see the itemized items that we spent $1 million on.
so we're asking for an itemized list of expenditures related to communications as a portion of the entire ATVES budget for both fiscal 18 and fiscal 19.
Yes.
Got it.
Thanks, Rob.
And I think I've taken up a number of questions, so I'll let my colleagues go. And I'll come back.
Council President Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On service number 500, on page 501, you don't have to go there. You list the number of streetlight outage service requests for the past few years. Can you inform the committee of what all goes into completing the service requests? That was the big topic earlier today about service requests not being taken care of.
So requests are put in 311. Once they're in 311, we go out and look at what needs to be done. We coordinate with BGE regarding the service because most of our street lights are maintained by BGE, 90% of the lights. Those lights then usually fall in one of three categories. Simple maintenance requests that can be repaired within about 5 days. A little more complex where it might take us, working with BG, about a month because there'll be more intensive electrical issues. And then the final category, which is a more severe conduit issue, will take a few months to repair. Those are tracked in 311. As we all know, the messaging that goes to the public and those who put the information in there, and that even we look at, isn't always customer friendly. We've embarked on retooling that process to make it seamless to the public. We're really working with BGE more in a partnership relationship going forward. And so what you'll see beginning this summer, when phase 2 of Salesforce kicks in, you'll see new messages that don't say something about BGE or DOT. You'll see messaging that gives more precise information and user-friendly information about the status and puts it into one of those 3 buckets that I just mentioned in terms of timeliness. And so that once the message is updated, there's some information that lets you know it's going to take a little longer to get the service repaired. We're also looking at our performance because even today, the timelines that we have are quite lengthy and we don't always make them. We don't always hit those deadlines. So we're working closely in collaboration with BGE to establish timeframes that we expect to meet and that feel reasonable.
Okay.
And so again, we'll be launching that within the next couple of months.
Well, let me ask you this question. Once you receive the service request, if it's BG&E, do you all close out the ticket and pass it on to BG&E?
That's what happens today, yes.
Okay. Well, that's where the problem lies when citizens call us and say it's closed, but it's still not done.
Yeah.
So, is there some kind of way we can inform 311 that it's been closed from DOT and it's into BG&E? I mean, that would help all of us, would it?
Oh,
That would help us greatly if you all can do that, because when people see closed, they think it's fixed, then they call screaming at us.
So that's going to go away this summer.
Yeah. How long does it take to replace a down street pole that was knocked down due to the storm?
So again, that is, it depends on our inventory. It depends on if there's any related issues with the knockdown, but typically 4 to 6 weeks, assuming we have the proper inventory once it's been knocked down from a storm.
Okay, do they come and remove the pole
Yes, they will
immediately?
come as soon as it's reported. Someone will be deployed to the site, and they'll make the site safe.
So if a storm happened, are we proactive going out instead of waiting for somebody to call to see if any poles are down?
When we know there's a storm, we are proactive, but sometimes there may be a gust that, you know, we don't always know about, and so what I always say is if you see something, if you report it in 311, there's no question that we will get it. And so we are dependent on the public's assistance because we're not inspecting every street all the time. But, you know, like the unfortunate storm over the weekend, we were out and taking appropriate action.
Okay. One thing I would like, and I'll be back, ask some more questions, is that we be proactive and replacing these faded signs that's all over the city. I mean, whose responsibility is that? Whose responsibility?
So that's in our maintenance shop, but it works closely with our traffic management office because the traffic management office is responsible for keeping the records of where all the signs are. If signs need to be replaced, doing the analysis for the type of sign.
Well, not to cut you off, we need that done immediately. They need to go out and replace those faded signs, especially the ones where it say no parking. And my last question is, who's responsible for checking on the mediums that's being cut by these private contractors? Because it looks a mess. I mean, it's not being done correctly. So whose job is it to go out there and look at that? Because it's grass all on the side of the median, and they leave the clippings inside instead of cleaning that up. Whose job is it to check on that stuff?
So we have project managers and inspectors, and
Well, they
we've
need to get out
alerted
there.
them to.
They need to get out there and do their job.
So we hope
Or
they're gonna
we're gonna
do
have
better
y'all
this
back
year.
in here again to address that, because I addressed it at the Board of Estimates when I told them we need to do it in-house. Because when we do it in-house, we do it right, because employees know that they have to do it right. And then when we out there, I don't see nobody look like me.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So my first one, I'm not sure how much of a problem this is everywhere in the city. I know that I have neighborhoods where some alleys get used significantly more than just by the people who happen to live there. Because of the roads that they connect, they get used as part of regular traffic. And what I'm trying to get a handle on is, do you have any program available to repave particularly heavy traveled alleys without having to engage the property owners adjacent to those alleys, which is what we do in most of the city, because in most of the city, alleys are really only used by the people who live there. But but we have alleys here and there that are heavily traveled. How can we get a program created so that those alleys can be identified and addressed by the city?
That program does not exist. We are looking at how we can respond to things like ADA requirements, where we've got to upgrade sidewalks, but adjacent property owners have to participate in that cost. And so we're looking at those shared cost programs to see if there's a way to make sure they adhere to how the facility is being used or the mandate we have for taking care of it.
Let me try to come at it. What I'm looking for is, would there be some way where DOT could do a traffic study, like do a little run a meter across these alleys, and identify a threshold where if an alley is getting so much more traffic than conventionally, then we will treat that alley like we would treat a neighborhood street.
Councilman, can we get, I think the director's confused. We need some clarification. You're asking for, is there policy that says how we treat a street versus an alley, and what can we do to change that policy? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, let's simplify it like that. Director, is there policy that dictates how we treat an alley versus street? And if so, so that's part one. Part two is, if so, how do we change that?
So I believe it's either in the charter or the code. I just asked this question. It's in the code. So it's a legal requirement to charge adjacent property owners. So
Okay.
that would have to be changed.
Okay, that's a great answer. Code.
Are you
Okay.
good, Councilman?
Pardon? No, I'm not. Oh, I'm good with that answer.
question,
I'm good with that answer. The next one, and this hopefully is a simple question. The crash protection devices where the exit ramps are on the JFX, is the city responsible for replacing those when they get hit?
Yes.
Okay. What's the time frame for that?
So I don't have that. I need to get back to you. But those are traffic attenuators, and I'll get back with you with that answer.
Okay, I think what I would ask for is there a policy such that those have to be replaced within a certain period of time? Because I've seen one now on the JFX for what seems like a couple weeks. It's still an unsafe place if there should be another crash there.
I don't know the answer, but there should be, and that's something that's so important for safety. I'll follow up on it immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Director, who on your team is responsible for that?
Kenny?
Kenny, can you just talk to Councilman Henry immediately after?
Yeah, I'll
We
come
can
down,
get
I'll come
this
find you.
Thank you very much, as always.
And two other quick ones.
I'm going to come back to you because I want to keep everyone at 2 so we can get a first pass through everyone.
Yes, sir.
If that's okay. I promise you we'll get back to you. Recycling your name to the end here. Okay. Councilman Scott's not back. Councilwoman Middleton.
Hello, Director Michelle.
Hi, Councilwoman.
Have you been here a year yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Almost.
Just want to make note that DOT has been going through some challenges for many years, and thank you for your service in trying to get a handle of things and move forward. I guess my first question, there was a council meeting we had, and our president stormed in and was basically sharing some thoughts that I think we all had about the gridlock around this, especially we can feel and understand around the perimeter of City Hall, Guilford, and Gay Street, and notice the change after the bike lanes and this big bus lane was put in and the problems. Has there been any look at that synchronization of lights? And, you know, that's just one example, because we're also getting calls in from our constituents of them coming in and getting out of this particular area. Could you address that?
So we've got 13 intersections that we've begun working on synchronization, in keeping with the Don't Block the Box program that we hope to launch soon. We're working on the regulatory provisions of that. But we're starting there, and you know, we'll be synchronizing the whole city over the next couple years. What we found is the lights down in that area have floated out of sequence. Those lights are all centrally controlled, though, so we're really excited about that. And we expect that you'll see changes coming up in the next month or two. But we are in a very congested area in the downtown, and so sometimes, like where we are, we're not on the major grid, and so it sometimes takes a little longer to get out of City Hall into the main freeway, the main areas, the primary streets. But we put a lot of requests in the capital budget for traffic signal work, and so I think I said briefly to do some upgrades in the traffic management center to enhance our signal system. as well as to the intelligent transportation part, which is how you really have kind of dynamic synchronization that relates to different events. You know, so in the summer when school's not in, you change your signals. When there's events at the stadium, you know, so we really need to modernize and be able to be more reactive to the type of events and the use of the system.
Glad you're aware and working on it. And my second question, I guess the timeline for the completion and follow-up of traffic studies within communities, are there any plans to improve the response time? Because there, you know, we have a process we follow where the association president puts in the request for a study for an area, and they don't hear sometime for months of what's happening. Of course, they call us, and then it's more time. Is there, there definitely has to be plans in place to improve that process, because we have areas in our residential communities that have, you know, gotten more traffic.
Yes. So that's another process improvement item where you'll see some changes once 311 is relaunched. We are reducing response time in there, but again, it's back to us meeting that time frame, and so we're looking at how we can do better at meeting the time frames that we've outlined. But I believe that that process is reactive, and we're supposed to be the professionals that are planning the system. So it gets back to having an overall transportation plan for the city, and then proactively looking at neighborhoods and working with neighborhoods on how to take the system that's been there a long time, how to take the infrastructure that's been there a long time, and update and renew it to what we need today. And so, as I mentioned, we started the baseline of the transportation plan, and we'll be working directly with each of the council about neighborhood plans, about existing transportation plans, about the existing condition of the network. And I think what we're gonna find is that we're going to be able to help residents know what they need. One of the problems with the traffic requests is that we get what the public believes is the answer. You know, they are requesting speed humps, or they're requesting a stop sign. Sometimes they request a traffic study, but then we need to know more. Mm-hmm. And so we really need to understand the problem more. We've got some great engineers, planners, others in the department that know it. Mm-hmm. Getting it down in a concise way in a document and working proactively on our priorities going forward, I think is really going to be the key to how we deal with and update the entire system.
And just a quick statement from Councilman Henry's, I guess, ordinance policy questions about alleys. I just want you to make note, remember, we in the city have paper alleys and regular alleys, and I'm also noticing that the paper alleys, particularly, some of them don't even have lights, and it's a crime problem. So we need to make sure we look and address both kinds of alleys.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
Council President.
Thank you. And while we're talking about alleys, it's the responsibility of DOT to make sure that weed and stuff is up out of the alley, and the weed around our poles, our light poles. Some of the weed is like 3-4 feet high. I would like to see you have your team out there, especially around my neighborhood, and get all of that cut, because it's their responsibility. They're supposed to do it. And the alleys where weed is growing up, where you ride the truck down or your car down, weed is coming up out of the ground. So that stuff needs to be taken care of. It used to be taken care of a long time ago. I don't know why they stopped, but they need to start again. Our citizens pay the highest property tax in the state, and they deserve the service that we need to provide for them. So we need to get on top of that. Mr. Chair, I just want to ask one more question, and I'm probably done. Can you tell me how much the Energy Office saved the department from having to finance out of your budget the mayor's initiative to replace the streetlights with LED?
So the with the conversion to LED, we're saving a lot, both in maintenance, so we don't have to change the bulbs as quickly because they last longer, in energy costs because the energy costs less. And so what we'll be realizing this year and on a yearly basis is estimated yearly savings of $1.3 million. And those savings is what has allowed us, working with the Energy Office, to pursue loans to finance the upkeep and the upgrade and the rehab of the streetlight system. And so that will take care of that 15-year loan investment and a straight payout.
Well, how much was allocated from your capital budget to do LED? How much was that cost?
So there's only staff costs in my budget for LED upgrade. Let me just make sure I'm telling you the right thing. So the $22 million in my streetlight budget is around us managing the program. 10% of the lights we maintain and operate. 60-something% we own, and so we have to buy equipment. We buy the poles when BGE upgrades the poles. And so there is a level of maintenance that we still have to do on the lighting system and the electrical system, even though we're upgrading the light itself.
Okay, because there was a number that was thrown around a while back to the tune of $30 million. You recall that? I don't think you were here, though, but they said something about $30 million to do all the lights in the city to LED.
Thrown around by us or by the Energy Office?
It might have been your guys. I don't know. I can't remember.
Can I?
I'll check
Can
with
I
the
try
energy
to
guys, but
remember?
I thought it came from transportation.
Okay.
But we'll follow up with that.
It may have been. So the program has been deployed incrementally, and so we're now in, I don't know what phase. Over half of the city has been upgraded, and so each time we're upgrading, we're borrowing or using or receiving budget authority for that portion of the program. When we finish, we will have spent over $70 million to upgrade all the lights. So that $30 million sounds a little like, the first half, the first portion, and so we can back into.
Okay. Well, if you can, what we already did in LED, if you can give us the cost that it costs so far and what the cost is going forward, because I know our energy office saved us a lot of money, and they can probably help save you more money if you have them involved in the process. Okay. So
They are very involved, and they're going to be here at 6 o'clock.
okay.
Ted is here.
Where is he?
Ted is here.
Oh.
Did you want him to come up?
Yeah. I want Ted to come up.
They kept saying Ted is
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know someone said that it would cost almost $30 million in capital money to replace the LED lights.
That's to replace the ones that we own, yes.
Okay.
The director was talking about the total, which is BG&E's portion plus ours. But
I'm
it's
talking
going
about our
to cost
portion.
30
Can you
plus
pull the
million.
mic up?
I'm sorry. 30 plus million
Okay. And
to replace ours. But we don't have to come up with that money because we're financing it through savings.
okay, through savings, okay. So we included BG&E into our LED lights as well?
BG&E owns, what, 28?
I know, are we doing theirs as well with
No,
LED?
they did theirs.
Okay,
but
so we're-
because they did theirs, that generated savings for us. We have to pay them less energy costs
Okay.
and less maintenance costs. So we can use that savings
Because I know
also-
somebody threw that figure around
also to
one time.
finance our lights.
Okay, all right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
Councilman Schleifer?
Yes. Hey, don't go anywhere. Can you come back up? Ted. No problem. Well, we got you here. So how long do these LEDs last for?
Well, they have a warranty, depending on the brand, anywhere from 10 to, oh, I'm sorry. They have a warranty anywhere from 10 to 15 years, depending on the brand and the manufacturer. So, but they seem to have a life that's longer than that.
So how do we, unless I'm missing something, how do we factor that the LEDs as a savings if the savings is $1.5 million a year, and they have a 10 to 15-year lifespan, but then the cost to replace is $30 million. So wouldn't we be operating at a $15 million loss over the course of the life of these light bulbs?
No, because the current lights, you got to replace every 2 to 3 years. So you're going to have to spend money to replace lights.
Right.
So now what we have is that we put in the LEDs, have a better light, much less energy, much less maintenance, and pay for those lights and not have to replace them. So, I mean, what can be, you're always going to have to replace lights. You had to before. So you got to look at, oh, I had that cost to replace those lights. I'm not throwing that in. But what we can do is that you can put together from looking at these, you know, start putting money aside, just like depreciation, so that you have that money to replace these lights in the future. And since we are replacing them over, you know, it's been BG&E's done some. We've already done some 5 years ago. We already did 12,000 lights. Then you've spread this over time. This replacement's going to be a 2.5 year program. So it's not like 15 years from now, every light in the city goes dark. They're not all going to die at the end of 15 years. They have life that beyond that. And they've been staggered out so that you would have a replacement program that's spread over a 3 to 4 year program at that time.
Right. So then you're saying that at some point we will have smaller balloon payments that would come due unless we're leaving the same current level of service as far as what the previous lights were to replace. Were those deducted from the budget when the LEDs were put in?
What we look at is that we don't have to spend as much money maintaining those, replacing them, and using those funds to borrow against those and the energy savings to finance the buying of these lights.
Gotcha. So is that coming into the budget every year, or are we in 10, 15 years from now going to have three balloon payments over the 3 years of replacing them?
That's something that DOT can decide how they want to budget for that. Right now, the replacement of lights don't end up in the budget since we're financing them totally separate from that. Right. So you can either budget starting 10 to 12 years from now, or, you know, that's probably the safer thing. You can't really budget 15 years ahead. But somebody, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, the purchase of the new light, it's financed, but then the debt service payments, it's a cost for a period of time, but the savings is because what they said, less maintenance, less energy costs. So the projects are looked at on a case-by-case basis. If we invest this much and we pay this much debt service over time, we need to generate at least that much or more in savings. And yeah, both sides of those are budgeted, the additional debt service, but then the savings on the LED.
Gotcha. So we don't know what the lifetime savings is on these bulbs yet, because we don't know if they're going to last for 10.
We have a projected savings based on what they're warranted at right now.
And what's
so
the
then it becomes that the real savings, or avoided cost is a better word, will be what the reality. We believe that what we have right now is the most conservative because we've taken energy prices of today, which are at a 60-year low in real dollars, and we've kept them flat for the next 5 years and then escalated at 1% after that. In the past, generally, when projecting, we escalated at 3% every year. So we have a very conservative number for energy prices. And so if things aren't as conservative as that, then we have a growing avoided cost. We avoid more and more because the energy, instead of being priced at 4 cents, grows to 5 cents, 6 cents, 7 cents. So that we have the potential for greater savings. The upside is much more potential than the downside of occurring.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then my second thing, I was going to ask another. That was one, homie.
Go ahead.
So, my other one's actually going to be on the next, so I'll pass it on. But I do want to give a shout out. Are the pothole guys here? Like Ron Hunter's here.
Branch is here. A couple guys, a couple pothole people are here.
So I want to give those guys a shout out because, you know, I read through these budget books over the past couple weeks, and, you know, I've seen it on the street with how quickly they respond. But it's also great to see it on paper with, you know, them, their efficiency reaching 99% of these potholes within 48 hours. So I think we all know about a lot of the shortfalls because we face that as well. But I think we should also applaud, you know, those that are getting the job done. more efficiently even than we've projected in the past. So thank you for those guys.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And we'll make sure the message gets back as well.
And make sure that when they fill potholes to start in the northwest corner and work their way down.
That's the way we always go. No, I mean, we go the other way. No, I mean, we go a different way.
Make that the last one.
Colleagues, right now it's 5:25 p.m. Hang on. It's okay with you? It's 5:25 p.m. right now. We are going to break at 5:30. We are going to come back promptly at 6, maybe a little sooner. And then we'll get to the other questions, and then we will move on to all services within DOT. Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Director, how are you this
Good, thank you.
evening? Just a quick question. This is, as you know, two issues that are big for me. First, I want to talk about alleys and footways. And actually, even though I was planning on asking this question, it's actually very pertinent after this weekend. Can you talk about what your agency could do with the maintenance and upkeep for example, paper alley and paper streets, if you guys had more money in your budget to do so? You know, if you're someone like myself or Councilman Dorsey or Councilman Mary Pat Clark or Councilman Schleifer or Councilman Henry, who represents the northern hemisphere of the city, you know that we all have these alleys and streets that are actually streets and alleys that are just grass. But for some reason, the city hasn't done a good job of maintaining them, which they often lead to issues, some of which, for example, your staff are handling me today, folks with flooding and things like that. Can we talk about what you guys actually need to deal with the paper alleys and paper streets throughout the city?
I can talk to you about it in concept. So paper alleys and streets many times aren't really even in our inventory. They may not even be owned by the city, depending on where they are. So the first thing we'd have to do is analyze that and then address if the city is ready to bring those into our inventory. What I found in my work over the years is when there's no real alley there, it needs to be constructed just like a new street would be constructed. And so that's a big financial investment. And so I think when we look at the program, we can definitely let you know a lot about where those alleys are, how many are this type, that type, what would need to be done to make them a part of our inventory. But we will be growing another area where there's limited funding, and they'll be competing for the same resources where many more people use the right-of-way. And so the reason why alleys and local streets tend to get the least amount of upgrade and repair is because the traffic on there is less, and fortunately, the safety issues usually are less as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. The follow-up would be, Mr. Chair, if this could be a request, I don't know what number we are on, if we could have DOT and I think Rec and Parks and probably DPW will be the other agencies to tell us whose responsibility it is for each and every paper alley and paper street in the city of Baltimore is, since none of them seem like they want to cut the grass there or stop the trees from falling on people's yards or stop the flooding from going into people's yards, because the city hasn't maintained them. People didn't choose to have an alley that was behind their house that wasn't paved, right? It just existed that way when they bought their house, and we have to do a better job of figuring out how to maintain right-of-ways, public right-of-ways. In some instances, actually worked with Mr. Murphy a few years ago where the city had to pay 2 guys to go in with a machete to cut out some property from behind a house that we had allowed to grow up over the last 30 or 40 years that we haven't maintained since the houses were built. So if we can make that request to have a list of all paper alleys and paper streets and whose responsibility it is to maintain them.
Councilman, if this works for you, when Mr. Stoser comes in with planning, why don't we ask the Department of Planning to map that out for the entire city? Including
we have the maps are readily available, but even with the maps, the whose responsibility it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Why don't we do a layer? Why don't we ask Tom to do a layer?
That is fine by me.
And then we'll have it all mapped out.
Mr. Chair, could you add the lights to that too? Because there's paper alleys with no lights.
With streetlights, okay.
And sorry, one more for the Christmas list, sir. On Baltimore Code Map, you can currently click on properties and see who's the responsible agency. You cannot do that with alleys. At least I don't believe so. So could we also add that to Code Map as well? That would to move us into the 21st century.
That's housing.
Is it housing?
That's
Okay.
housing?
All right, I'll
Code
wait for
Map.
housing to get
We're
here.
gonna talk with, we're not making a request right now. We're just letting government relations know that we're gonna have a discussion with housing and planning when the time comes over the next 3 days. And we will ask either Commissioner Braverman or Director Stoser to take the lead on coordinating with all the agencies and getting all that stuff mapped. Councilman Scott, that covers you, I think, and we'll include the lighting in there, Councilwoman Middleton, so there'll be a DOT and BG component to that.
And include
And-
someone from the police department, because there's prostitution going on in some of these alleys.
Okay, I think that's, maybe we get the map done first and give it to the police department, if that's all right. And then Councilman Burnett, we'll ask to get that done in Code Map. Councilman Scott, you good?
No, I have one more question.
Please.
Thank you. Ma'am, and then the other, of course, the other big item for me, of course, is something you know about with street management, is the concrete streets. Have we talked about this and you said you were doing analysis. Do you have an update?
Mohammed, do you have an update on that you want to give, or you want to get back with the councilman? Why don't you come share a little with?
If he doesn't have it today, he can get back to me. I mean, they waited 40 years, so a couple more days not gonna hurt.
Good afternoon, Mohammed Khalid, the Chief Engineer for DOT. On the
In the mic, yeah, there you go. Thank
Sorry,
you, Mohammed.
thank you. Our concrete streets, we have about $500,000 on our HUR fund. In addition to that, we also have some federal funds for federal streets which are concrete. So that's what we are limited to, is about $500,000 a year on concrete streets.
Yeah, I guess the question is that's something that the director and I have talked about. The question is that, as you know, that can basically be 2 blocks, right? So if I have 60 of them in my district and Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark has like 40 of them in hers, the question for the director is, have we looked at another way to do them, right? Because we've been told in the past that we can't overlay them with asphalt, that we have to put them back as concrete. And if we're going to do them basically 1 or 2 blocks at a time, it's going to take us my great-great-great-great-great-grandkids' lifetime for us to get that done. Have we looked at a more sustainable solution, or are there grants that we can apply for? If there's some way that we can try to get, because we know they last longer, right? We know that they last a long time when they're done, but they are very expensive, and we haven't made a significant investment. We're just trying to figure out the best way for us to go back and tell our constituents it's going to happen in this time frame, or we have to look at different ways of doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It costs about 3 times more than a full-depth asphalt would be on a concrete street, but they last 4 times longer. That is very true. Now, having said that, there's a lot of old concrete streets, and we might be able to do a 2-inch of asphalt cover on it, depending upon the condition of that concrete is. So that is something we'll definitely will look at.
Thank you.
Councilman Pinkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that we're past the time designated for this particular panel. So if it's okay with you, I will hold the questions that I have until the next session and defer to my colleague, Councilwoman Clark, if that's okay.
Councilwoman Clark? Councilman Pinkett's deferring to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Councilman. 2 things for now that I'd like to mention. Crossing guards and what we're now calling TOs. So basically, I'll give you this in writing, and Mr. Chairman, if I can have it answered in writing, I'll give it to you. But here are my questions. We had a crossing guard crisis about a year before you arrived in Baltimore. By the way, thank you for all your help, for my district, for my neighbors, for so many projects going on. Thank you. Here are the questions. What happened was we were losing crossing guards, and then more vacancies of their positions were being kept vacant. and we were starting to have fewer crossing guards on the corners and no one to and this is my 5th District colleagues' biggest problem, no alternates to replace in the morning if a crossing guard was absent and that school then became uncovered. So my questions are, how many crossing guards in the fiscal year 2019 budget are well, right now, how many are working at our schools? And next year, coming up, will that same number or more be employed? And how many vacant positions are being kept vacant? I hope none. What is the authorized number of crossing guard positions in both years? And are any changes in authorized positions, working hours, or conditions of employment
Councilwoman.
anticipated, Mr. Marshall?
Councilwoman, can we just dissect that a little, just so we make sure they answer everything?
I want to make sure, well, I've written it out, so
I think
will
I
hand
have a
everyone.
summary, and he can give you the exact numbers.
All right, I know
the
that-
summary is, thank you, we've got a lot.
Let's go to, sorry, Director. Sorry, Councilwoman. I think they have an answer for you. Toby?
Toby Goodwin, DOT Safety.
Pull the mic up.
Chief, thank you, and I would love to hear your answer. That I want to know about the TOs as well. And even though I love to hear the sound of your voice, I also want the answers in writing afterwards. Okay?
Yes,
and I'll
ma'am.
give you the questions.
So starting with the crossing guards, we have 253 budgeted. We have about 20-some vacant. We're in a continuous interview process to fill those vacancies.
Trying to fill the vacancies.
Yes, ma'am. With the TO&Es, I'm sorry, thinking I'm in the military.
Any changes to what their hours are?
No, ma'am.
What their regulations are? All the things that go with their jobs?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now the TOs.
TOs.
Now you've got the parking control agents and the STIOs are now in one big group called TOs.
Yes, ma'am.
So what I'd like to find out is, first of all, do you have the same number of people? If you put the two groups together, does it add up to whatever number that is? Do we still have that many people employed and funded in the budget for next year?
Historically, Councilman, I cannot speak to previously. I can tell you right now, I have 118 TOs actively right now. We have approximately 25 vacancies.
And that number stays the same for 2019.
Right.
Okay, so I'm still, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I am going to hand over these questions.
Please.
Yes, so that we can get written back to the committee. But thank you very much for that. They're both very important. And one question I have in here is, if I've been spending my life as a parking control agent, going around zapping and, with tickets, and I've spent my life directing traffic to try to get people through downtown, and now I'm all one thing, how do you divide up? I just don't know this. How do you divide up? You just call them all TOs, but you keep parking control in one group and traffic direction in another?
No, ma'am. We call them all traffic enforcement officers, and they all are able to perform all aspects of the job.
And do they all do that every day? It would be maybe they do, but do they?
Throughout the day, we have various assignments for the TOs, but they can operate in all facets of the operation.
And is it finally true that TOs have it in some contract with the city that they don't have to, if they don't want to, work outside the limits of downtown? I ask you that because we would like to substitute and pay TOs for like festivals and everything because police are so expensive.
We work in conjunction with BCPD on special events, and we have an office within DOT that works with the special events organizations. So we do supplement the support of BCPD.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to your agency.
Quite well.
Councilwoman, could you please, Toby, hang tight 1 second. Councilwoman, can you get that in writing to Marguerite, please? Council President?
We want y'all to do all of the festivals because it's cost effective for us. We don't want the police doing our festivals.
Yes,
Right,
sir.
we can't afford it.
I just want to, let you know that.
And
Yes, sir.
that's what we want permits to know. We just can't have police, we can't afford
Okay,
them.
Councilwoman, you're going to get that to Marguerite. We are going to go into recess. We will be back in 19 and a half minutes.